I'm Margaret Maggie Lewis, and on a quiet morning, while pouring my usual cup of coffee in my familiar kitchen, I made one phone call that froze my daughter's credit card without warning. Instead of being welcomed at her engagement dinner, I found out that Lily, the only child I've sacrificed everything for, had secretly drained $17,000 of my life savings on a lavish wedding I wasn't even invited to. And my son, he's been sprawled out on Richard's old sofa, my late husband's favorite spot, living rent-free and treating my house like his own. I set my coffee down, looked around the empty room, and took a deep breath. Within minutes, I'd called the bank, revoked their access, and set in motion a legal plan they had no idea was coming. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you are while listening to this story, because what happens next will show you exactly how I took my life back and made them face the consequences. The day it all truly began was a Wednesday, ordinary by every measure except for the envelope that slid through my mail slot just after noon. I had been sorting laundry in the hallway, trying to keep myself busy in that aimless, post-retirement way, when I heard the soft thud of the mail hitting the floor. Mixed in with grocery flyers and a bill from the electric company was a crisp, white envelope from my credit card company. I didn't think much of it at first. My balance was usually low. A few grocery purchases, the occasional dinner with friends. But the moment I tore it open, the air in the room seemed to change. My eyes went straight to the total $17,000. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, a decimal point in the wrong place, a number that belonged to someone else's statement. But then I scanned the itemized charges, and my stomach tightened. Enchanted Bloom Florist, 3200, Bella Vista Reception Hall, 8500, Morrison's Catering, $4,800, and those were just the big ones. My first instinct was disbelief. Surely, there was some explanation. Maybe the bank had mixed up accounts. But deep down, I already knew the truth. 3 years ago, I'd added Lily to my credit card for emergencies. At the time, it seemed like the responsible, loving thing to do. She was fresh out of graduate school, living paycheck to paycheck, and I told myself it was a safety net she'd rarely use. The key word there was told myself. As I stood there, statement trembling in my hand, memories came rushing back. The first time she used the card without asking just a few $100s for unexpected car repairs. Then there was the new laptop for her teaching job that I later learned she'd bought mostly for streaming movies. Each time, she promised to pay me back, and each time, that promise dissolved into silence. But $17,000, this wasn't an oversight. This was a choice. I set the statement on the kitchen counter and walked to the window. Outside, the neighborhood was calm. Mrs. Duncan, now Susan Hartman, was tending to her garden across the street, her wide-brimmed hat bobbing among the roses. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. It was the kind of quiet that had once soothed me, but now felt mocking. Inside my chest, anger began to build, slow and steady like a pot left to boil. The creak of the front door pulled me from my thoughts. Ethan's voice rang out before I even saw him. "Hey, Mom, can I borrow the car tonight? Rebecca and I are going to check out an apartment in Riverside." I closed my eyes for a moment, bracing myself. He appeared in the doorway, all casual confidence, wearing the jeans I'd bought him for Christmas. "Can you come here a minute?" I asked, my voice calm, but edged with steel. He frowned, clearly impatient, but stepped into the kitchen. I slid the statement across the counter toward him. "Did you know about this?" His eyes flicked to the paper and back to me. That familiar tell he'd had since he was 10, and caught with a hand in the cookie jar. "Know about what?" "Your sister," I said, my voice flat, "charged $17,000 to my credit card for her wedding." He shrugged. Actually shrugged, and something inside me shifted. "Yeah, she mentioned it. Look, Mom, it's just money. You can afford it, right?" She's been so stressed. "Just money." My voice cracked on the words. "Ethan, that's my entire emergency fund. That's everything I have for when something goes wrong." "It's a loan," he said, as if the word excused everything. "She'll pay you back." I stared at him, really looked at him, this man I'd raised, whose skinned knees I'd bandaged, whose failures I'd softened with my own sacrifices. And here he was, treating the gutting of my savings like it was a temporary inconvenience. I changed the subject abruptly. "When's Lily's engagement dinner?" He hesitated. "Too long. I think they already had it. Just a small thing. You know how she is about keeping it intimate." That was the moment, more than the charges, more than the shrug when the full weight of it landed. The exclusion wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. They'd had a celebration, and I hadn't even been invited. "I see," I said, folding the statement neatly, almost ceremoniously. "And the wedding? Am I still invited to that?" "Of course, Mom. Don't be dramatic." Dramatic. As if asking to be included in my own daughter's life was an overreaction. The conversation ended soon after, with Ethan grabbing the car keys and mentioning that Rebecca would be staying over. When the front door slammed, I was left alone with the echo of it, and with the statement that lay like a wound on my counter. I sank into Richard's old chair by the window, 4 years since he'd passed, and I still kept it exactly as it had been, part comfort, part superstition. I imagined what he'd say if he were here. He'd probably tell me to stand up for myself, to draw the line. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Lily. "Hey Mom, can you cover the catering deposit for next month? It's only like $2,000. Dad's life insurance should cover it. Right, you're the best." Only $2,000, as if the $17,000 wasn't enough. As if Richard's life insurance, already eroded by medical bills, and Ethan's failed business ventures were hers to spend. I stared at the message until the words blurred, my jaw tightening. Then, without a second thought, I deleted it. For 34 years, I'd said yes to everything, every crisis, every whim, every bad decision they didn't want to face alone. But sitting there in the fading afternoon light, I realized that yes had turned into permission. Permission to use me. Permission to erase me from their lives, except when they needed my wallet. That's when the idea started to form, not just to say no, but to mean it, to make sure they understood that the version of me who would quietly absorb the blows was gone. The credit card statement was still in my hand. I folded it once, twice, 3 times. By tomorrow morning, I told myself, I'd be making calls, and for the first time in months, maybe years, the silence in my house didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like possibility. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept replaying the years of small betrayals, the casual exclusions, the way they had normalized treating me as a resource instead of a person. But instead of drowning in it, I found myself planning. Step 1, the credit card. Step 2, the bank accounts. Step 3, my will sell. By the time the sun rose, I was dressed and ready. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, opened the curtains wide, and let the light flood in. Today wasn't just another Wednesday. Today was the beginning of my reckoning. When I picked up the phone to call the credit card company, my voice was steady. "I need to report unauthorized charges," I said, and with each word I felt the weight shift away from my shoulders, back to where it belonged. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just reacting. I was taking control, and I had no intention of giving it back. The credit card representative was polite, almost gentle, as if she could hear the resolve under my calm tone. She asked for dates, amounts, merchant names. I read them out like a grocery list I'd memorized. Each charge another stitch in the wound I was finally closing. When she explained that the bank would freeze the account and launch an investigation, she hesitated. "Ma'am, I need to let you know, if these charges are found to be fraudulent, it could lead to criminal charges against the cardholder." "I understand," I said, and I did. The truth was, I wasn't afraid of that possibility. If Lily thought nothing of taking thousands from me, without a conversation. Maybe facing the law would be the only thing that made her understand what she'd done. When the call ended, I sat for a moment, letting the quiet fill the kitchen. Then I reached for the next domino, the bank. Ethan had been an authorized user on my checking and savings accounts for 2 years. That ended today. The banker on the phone was efficient. 10 minutes later, his debit card was deactivated, his access revoked. I imagined him later that afternoon, standing at a gas pump or grocery store, swiping his card and seeing declined flash in red. Not out of spite, but because, for once, the consequence would be his to carry. I poured another cup of coffee, my hands steady now. This wasn't rage, this was clarity. Step 3 would take more time. My will hadn't been touched since Richard died. Back then, I'd been convinced the fair thing to do was leave everything equally to my 2 children, the house, the retirement funds, the last of Richard's insurance. I'd trusted that, despite their flaws, they'd care for what I left them with gratitude and respect. But people will show you exactly who they are if you pay attention, and I had been paying attention for years. I called Claire Bennett, my attorney, and told her I needed to revise my will and discuss unauthorized use of my accounts. She didn't press for details over the phone, but I could hear the concern in her voice as she set an appointment for that afternoon. It was just after 9 when I finally looked at my phone. 4 missed calls from Lily, 2 from Ethan, no voicemails, just the persistent ringing of people who believed that if they called enough times, I'd eventually answer and give them what they wanted. By the 4th ring, I gave in not because I was ready to listen, but because I wanted to hear exactly how they would spin this. "Mom, thank God," Lily's voice burst through, high-pitched and frantic. "Something's wrong with your credit card. The florist called payment for the centerpieces bounced. The venue is calling me. What's going on?" I leaned against the counter. "The card's been frozen," I said evenly. "What? Why, Mom? The wedding is in 6 weeks. These people need to be paid." I'm aware of the timeline. There was a pause, the kind where you can hear the other person trying to figure out the right emotional lever to pull. When Lily spoke again, her voice was softer, coaxing. "Mom, please. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. Just call them back and tell them the charges are fine. This is my wedding, your only daughter's wedding. Don't you want me to be happy?" It was the question she'd been asking me in one form or another for 31 years. "Don't you want me to be happy? Don't you love me enough to fix this?" "I want you to pay for your own wedding," I said, like adults do. Silence. I could almost feel her disbelief through the phone. "We can't afford." "Then maybe you should plan a wedding you can afford." The silence deepened, brittle and dangerous. "You're being unreasonable," she finally snapped. "You've always been there for me, and now over some credit card bill." "This isn't about a bill, Lily. It's about the fact that you used my money without asking and excluded me from your engagement dinner. You don't get to erase me from your life and still expect me to bankroll it." Her voice sharpened, her patience gone. "You know what, Mom, forget it. I'll figure it out. But don't come crying to me when you're alone in that house with nobody left." And then she hung up. I stared at the phone for a moment, the old reflex to call back flickering and dying in my chest. I had spent decades fearing that kind of exit, that my children would leave and never return if I set boundaries. But now, the sound of her absence was almost peaceful. I went to the hardware store next. The man behind the counter, probably in his 70s, helped me choose a sturdy set of deadbolts for both the front and back doors. "Changing locks is easier than most folks think," he said with a smile. "YouTube's got videos for everything." When I got home, Ethan's car was in the driveway. Inside, Rebecca was making a smoothie in my kitchen, while Ethan sat at the table scrolling through his phone. "Something's wrong with my debit card," he said without looking up. "And Lily's been blowing up my phone all morning. She says you froze her credit card. What the hell, Mom?" I set my purse on the counter. keeping my voice even. I closed your access to my accounts. And yes, I'm aware of Lily's situation. Rebecca turned from the blender, her eyes wide. Oh my God, Maggie, you scared us. We thought maybe you were sick or something, making such weird financial decisions all of a sudden. Weird financial decisions from a woman who had been subsidizing both of them for years. Rebecca, I said, I need you to gather your things and leave. She blinked, then laughed like I'd made a joke. What? Why? Because this is my home, and you don't live here. Ethan finally looked up, irritation flashing in his eyes. Mom, what's going on with you today? You're acting crazy. I'm acting like someone who owns her own house and manages her own finances, I said, moving to pour myself some coffee. Rebecca, you have 10 minutes to pack your things. Ipan. Rebecca glanced at Ethan, waiting for him to step in. She's my girlfriend, he said. She's welcome here. Not anymore. Ethan pushed back his chair, his voice rising. This is ridiculous. Over what? Some credit card mix-up. Lily will pay you back. When has she ever paid me back? I asked quietly. For the car insurance in college, the security deposit for her first apartment, the loan for her master's degree. That's different. That's what parents do. No, I said. That's what I did. Past tense. Rebecca didn't wait for him to argue again. She grabbed her yoga mat and crystals, mumbling something about waiting in the car. Ethan stood there, glaring at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. If she leaves, I leave too, he warned. That's your choice, I said, sipping my coffee. But if you leave, you don't come back whenever it's convenient. For a moment, his face faltered. Then he grabbed his jacket and stormed out, the front door slamming so hard the walls rattled. The house was quiet again, but this time, it was the kind of quiet that felt clean, like a space finally cleared of things that didn't belong. I sat back down at the table, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. 2 locks to install, 1 will to rewrite, and a long road ahead. But for the first time in years, the path was mine to walk. By the time I arrived at Claire Bennett's office that afternoon, the new locks were already installed. The front door clicked shut behind me, with a satisfying finality when I left the house, and I'd tested them twice, each turn of the key feeling like a small victory. Claire's office smelled faintly of leather and coffee, her mahogany desk stacked neatly with legal pads and case files. She rose to greet me, her silver hair pulled back in a low bun, those sharp eyes scanning my face. Maggie, she said warmly, but with an undercurrent of concern. It's been a while. What's going on? I sat, folding my hands in my lap. It's a lot, but it starts with 17,000 in unauthorized charges on my credit card. My daughter, for her wedding, without asking me. Claire didn't interrupt. She just nodded for me to go on. And my son, I continued, has been living in my house for free, his girlfriend treating it like her personal retreat. Neither of them sees anything wrong with it. When I pushed back, they called me dramatic, unreasonable. Claire's pen scratched against her notepad. Has this been happening for a while? Yes, years. Since Richard died, it's gotten worse. I think they see me as a resource, not a person. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Maggie, what you're describing could legally be considered financial elder abuse. The words hit me like a cold gust of wind. I'd read about that news stories, cautionary tales. I'd never imagined my own children's behavior might fit the definition. I'm not looking to press criminal charges, I said quickly. I just want to make sure they understand there are consequences. Claire leaned back in her chair. Then we start with your will. What does it currently say? I told her how I'd split everything equally between Lily and Ethan, the house, the retirement accounts, the remains of Richard's life insurance naming Ethan as executor. I want to change that, I said. The house and half my assets go to charity, the Literacy Foundation, the animal shelter, maybe a senior assistance program. They can split what's left of my retirement accounts, but only after they've repaid what they've taken over the years. Claire's pen moved quickly. And executor. You, if you're willing. She nodded without hesitation. I am. We spent the next hour going through details, charity names, asset valuations, clauses to prevent them from challenging the will. When we finished, I felt lighter, like I'd shifted a weight I'd been carrying for years. By the time I walked back to my car, the sky had turned a dusky gold. My phone buzzed as I started the engine. Ethan. Again, I ignored it. The next buzz came seconds later. Lily. I silenced the phone entirely. When I got home, the driveway was empty. No Ethan, no Rebecca. For a moment, I thought maybe they'd decided to stay away. But when I unlocked the front door, I saw a note on the kitchen counter in Ethan's handwriting. Call me. We need to talk. I set it aside without reading further. Talking had never been the problem. Listening had. I poured a glass of water and was halfway to the living room when the knock came at the back door, soft, almost hesitant. Through the window, I saw Susan Hartman, my neighbor from 2 houses down, holding a covered casserole dish. I opened the door. Susan, hi. I hope I'm not intruding, she said, her eyes kind but cautious. I heard some raised voices earlier. Saw Ethan leaving with a couple of suitcases. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. I'm fine, I said automatically, then paused. Actually, that's not entirely true, but I'm handling it. She smiled gently. Would you like some company while you handle it? I made too much lasagna, and eating alone gets old. It had been a long time since anyone had shown up at my door without wanting something from me. I found myself nodding. I was just about to open a bottle of wine. We sat at my kitchen table. 40 minutes later, plates of lasagna steaming in front of us. Susan told me she was a widow too. Her husband had died 3 years ago from the same cancer that took Richard. Her 2 grown kids lived out of state, calling once a week like clockwork. They mean well, she said, but sometimes it feels like they're checking a box. I told her about Lily and Ethan, not the sugar-coated version I might have given a casual acquaintance, but the truth, the credit card, the exclusions from family events, the way their affection seemed directly proportional to their access to my money. Susan listened, nodding occasionally, her expression steady. When I finished, she leaned back. You did the right thing. I feel terrified and relieved and guilty for feeling relieved. She sipped her wine. The guilt will fade. The relief will grow stronger. Trust me. I wanted to. Halfway through our second glasses, my phone buzzed again. A text from Lily Mom. Please call me back. I'm scared. I don't know what to do about the wedding. I'm sorry if I upset you, but please don't punish me for using the card. It was an emergency. I handed the phone to Susan. She read it, her lips tightening, still playing the victim. Notice she's sorry if she upset you, not sorry for taking the money, and she's reframing theft as punishment. I hadn't seen it that way before, but she was right. Even her apology was a manipulation. What would you do? I asked. What feels right to you? I looked at the message again, felt the old tug of maternal guilt, and then I deleted it without responding. Good, Susan said simply. We talked until nearly 10 o'clock about gardening, books, the peculiar loneliness of widowhood. For the first time in years, I felt a connection that wasn't based on obligation or transaction. When she left, promising to return the casserole dish tomorrow, I stood in the doorway watching her cross the street. The house was quiet, but not the hollow kind of quiet I'd come to dread. This was different. It felt possible. I was rinsing our wine glasses when my phone rang again. Ethan. Mom. He began without preamble. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot today. Rebecca and I are staying at her place tonight, but I wanted to talk. I'm listening. The debit card thing really messed us up. I had to pay for dinner with quarters I found in the car. And Lily's freaking out. The venue says if they don't get the final payment by Friday, they're canceling the booking. That sounds stressful for her. He paused. Mom, I don't understand what's happening. You're acting like a stranger. Maybe you never really knew me very well. Silence stretched between us. So what now? We just don't talk anymore. We can talk anytime you want, Ethan, but the conversation will be different now. Different how? I won't be giving you money. I won't be solving your problems. I won't be pretending that being taken advantage of is the same thing as being loved. Jesus, Mom, you make it sound like we're criminals or something. Aren't you? The question hung in the air. I could hear him breathing, the wheels turning. I need to think about this, he said finally. Take all the time you need. When the call ended, I stood for a long moment in the quiet kitchen, the smell of lasagna still lingering, the weight in my chest just a little lighter. Tomorrow, there would be new calls, new arguments, new attempts to pull me back into the old patterns. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't in years in control. Thursday morning, I woke to the sound of tires crunching in my driveway. Peeking through the blinds, I saw Lily's car parked crookedly, the hood glistening with early morning dew. She was sitting on my front porch steps, knees pulled to her chest, hair tied up in a messy knot, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Even from the window, I could see the streaks of mascara down her cheeks. I made coffee first because I knew this wasn't going to be a short conversation, then toast, deliberately taking my time. When I finally opened the door at 8:30, the morning sun was already bright, casting long shadows across the porch. Mom, she said, her voice hoarse, I've been here since 5. We need to talk. Good morning, Lily, I said, my tone even. You look exhausted. She got to her feet, swaying slightly. I didn't sleep. I can't eat. The wedding is ruined, and I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I'm not doing anything to you, I said, folding my arms. I'm simply not doing things for you anymore. Her voice cracked. The venue canceled. They called yesterday afternoon. The final payment didn't go through. 2 years of planning gone. I studied her face. Letting the silence stretch, she still had that remarkable ability to make herself look like a wounded child, even at 31. What does David think about all this? I asked. Her eyes darted away. He doesn't know. I haven't told him about the money problems. He thinks everything's paid for. She stepped closer. Mom, please, I'm begging you, just this once, help me fix this. Just this once. The phrase that had preceded nearly every financial request she'd ever made. Sit down, I said, gesturing to the porch chairs Richard had built years ago. We're going to have a conversation, but not the one you're expecting. She perched on the edge of the chair like she might bolt at any second. If this is about paying you back, she began. It's about respect, I interrupted. When did you decide I wasn't worth inviting to your engagement dinner? Her mouth opened and closed. It was just immediate family, David's parents, his sister. I am your immediate family, Lily. I'm your mother. She shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't about you. I just wanted to keep it small. Small is a choice. Excluding me was another. I let the words hang before continuing. When did you decide that using my credit card without permission was acceptable? You said I could use it for emergencies. A wedding is not an emergency, I said sharply. It's a celebration you plan for, and $17,000 requires a conversation. Her composure was cracking now, her voice rising. Fine, I should have asked first. I'm sorry, but the damage is done, and we can fix it if you'll just… No. The words stopped her cold. What do you mean, no? I mean, I'm not fixing your problems anymore. I'm not paying for your choices. I'm not being treated like an ATM with a house attached. You're my mother, she shot back, her face flushed. Yes, and for 31 years, I've shown you unconditional love. I've sacrificed, supported, enabled you through every crisis and poor decision. And in return, you've learned to see me as a resource, not a person." Her tears came then, but they weren't the soft, sorrowful kind. These were hot, angry tears. "So what? You're just going to abandon me? Let my wedding be ruined because you're having some kind of midlife crisis?" "I'm 62, I said evenly. "If I'm having any kind of crisis, it's a late life awakening." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Susan Coffey. "Later if you need reinforcements." I smiled inwardly at the perfect timing. "I need you to leave now," I told Lily. "You're welcome to come back when you're ready to have an adult conversation about how we move forward." She stood, her voice rising. "You want an adult conversation? Fine. You're a lonely old widow who's driving away the only people who care about you. You'll die alone, and it'll be your fault." The cruelty landed like a slap, but I didn't flinch. "Goodbye, Lily." "Mom, wait." The panic in her voice was real now. "I didn't mean that. I'm just scared and upset." I stepped inside and closed the door, locking it. She pounded on it for several minutes, alternating between apologies and threats, before finally retreating to her car. From the window, I watched her sit there for another 20 minutes, probably calling Ethan or David, before finally backing out of the driveway. By noon, the cavalry arrived. First came Jennifer, my ex-daughter-in-law, someone I'd always liked. She stood on my porch with her hands clasped. "Hi, Maggie. Ethan asked me to come talk to you." I invited her in and poured coffee. When she asked what was going on, I told her the truth. No sugarcoating. She looked stunned. "I had no idea. Ethan always made it sound like you were happy to help." "I was," I said, past tense. She hesitated, then said, "He's really struggling right now," but stopped herself, realizing she was proving my point. She left soon after, clearly uncomfortable. Not long after, David appeared. His face was serious, almost pained. "Mrs. Lewis, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I wanted to apologize." "For what?" I asked. "For not knowing. Lily told me you'd offered to help with the wedding expenses. I thought it was your gift to us. If I'd known she was taking money without your permission, I never would have let it happen." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. We sat on the back porch, and he told me he'd been offering to contribute more, but Lily had insisted everything was handled. He admitted he was starting to see patterns in her behavior, her resistance to downsizing the wedding, her defensiveness whenever he brought up money. "She didn't invite you to the engagement dinner, did she?" he asked quietly. "No, she told me it was just family." He exhaled slowly. "She told me you were busy and declined." When he left, I called Susan, who showed up within the hour with a bottle of wine and Chinese takeout. We were halfway through our lo mein when my phone rang again. "Ethan." "Mom, this has gone far enough," he said. "Lily's a mess. David's asking questions. You're destroying the family over money." "I'm not destroying anything, Ethan. I'm refusing to fund it." "You're turning everyone against us." "I'm telling them the truth. If that turns them against you, maybe the problem isn't the truth." His voice hardened. "Fine. You want to play hardball. We'll have you declared incompetent. Sudden changes, irrational financial decisions, you're not thinking straight." Susan raised an eyebrow from across the table, mouthing the word amateur. "Try it," I said. "Claire has documentation of every step I've taken. I'm protecting my assets from unauthorized use. You won't win." There was a pause, then a grudging, "This isn't over." "No," I said, "it's just beginning." When I hung up, Susan poured us each another glass of wine. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff," I admitted, terrified, but free. She smiled. "The terrified part will fade. The free part will grow stronger." That night, as I cleaned up the kitchen, I realized she was right. The fear was there, but so was something else, something I hadn't felt in decades: strength. The next few days were quiet, in the way a storm can be quiet, calm skies masking the churn beneath. I knew Lily and Ethan were regrouping, testing new angles to break through my resolve. It wasn't paranoia, it was 34 years of experience. Sunday morning, I was deadheading roses in the backyard when my phone buzzed. Susan, standing 2 yards over at her fence, gave me a knowing glance as I answered. Maggie, Lily's voice was strained, teetering between desperation and anger. I've been thinking about what you said. I know I messed up. Can we talk in person? I hesitated. If you're ready to have a real conversation, no deflection, no manipulation, then yes, Ushem. She arrived that afternoon, pulling up in a rideshare instead of her usual shiny SUV. Her hair was unwashed, and the carefully curated poise I was used to was replaced by something raw. Mom, she said as soon as I opened the door, I have nowhere else to go. Melissa's couch is killing my back, and I can't keep living out of a suitcase. I stepped aside, letting her into the living room, but not deeper. This isn't your home anymore, Lily. That ended when you decided I wasn't family enough to invite to your engagement dinner. She flinched. I told you it wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said, and even if it wasn't, you still took 17,000 from me without asking. Her eyes filled with tears. I said I'm sorry. No, I corrected. You said you were sorry you upset me. I'm asking if you're sorry for what you did. I don't understand the difference, she snapped. That, I said, is exactly the problem. Thut. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she tried a different approach. What do you want from me? I'll apologize again. I'll make payments. I want you to understand the difference between regretting consequences and regretting choices. I want you to respect me enough to ask before you take. And if you can't do that, you'll have to live with the outcome. Her voice dropped to a whisper. So, we just don't have a relationship anymore. We can have one, I said, but it has to be built on mutual respect, not financial dependency. She stared, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she turned and left without another word. I watched from the window as she walked down the driveway, head bent, climbing into another rideshare. That night, Ethan called. Lily told me what happened. This is insane. Mom, she's your daughter. She's an adult who made adult choices, I replied, and now she's dealing with adult consequences. You're destroying the family, he said for the second time that week. No, Ethan, I'm refusing to be destroyed by it. His tone shifted, softening. What if we change? What if we, I don't know, pay you back, treat you better? The words were tentative, like he was testing the ground. Then we'll see what happens, I said, but change has to be real, not just a tactic to restore your access to my resources. How do we prove it's real? You don't prove it to me, I said. You prove it to yourselves by becoming the kind of people who don't need to prove it. There was a long pause before he said, I'll think about it. Do that, I said, and hung up. The next morning, Susan appeared at my back door with 2 mugs of coffee. You held your ground, she asked. I nodded. They're circling, looking for weak spots. I can feel it. She grinned. Then stop looking at them as predators and start seeing yourself as the wall they can't climb. Her words stayed with me all day. That afternoon, I went through my house with a small box, gathering everything Ethan and Lily had left behind: hoodies, chargers, makeup bags, random clutter that had lived here so long I'd stopped noticing. I set the box in the garage with a label, "Pick up at your convenience." It was a message. Even if they didn't realize it yet, this is no longer your space to occupy. Later, as I was making dinner, my phone rang again. This time it was David. I hope it's okay to call, he said. I wanted to let you know. I called off the wedding. I set down the knife I was holding. I'm sorry. David, are you okay? I am, he said after a pause, relieved, actually, But I felt like you deserved to know. He hesitated. I have something for you. When he arrived 20 minutes later, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $8,500. This is half the charges that were reversed, he explained. I benefited from that money too. I want to make it right. I looked at him, at the sincerity in his face. David, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do, he said, because I know what it's like to be used, and I don't want to be the kind of man who looks the other way. It was the kind of integrity I hadn't seen in my own children for a long time. After he left, I called Susan. She came over within minutes, her eyes widening when I told her about the check. Good man, she said. Too bad he was marrying your daughter. We laughed, a real laugh that lifted the heaviness in the room. But even in that moment of lightness, I knew this wasn't over. Lily and Ethan had been quiet for a day, but quiet could be dangerous. Quiet meant plotting. Sure enough, the next morning, I got a message from a mutual family friend. Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. Ethan and Lily are telling people you've lost it, that you're not making rational decisions. It didn't surprise me, but it still stung. I spent the rest of the day in the garden, pulling weeds, pruning, letting the physical work ground me. Susan joined me after lunch, and we worked in companionable silence. You know, she said as she watered a row of lavender, this is what winning looks like. Not loud, not dramatic, just living your life without them running it. That night, as I sat in Richard's old chair, I realized she was right. The siege wasn't about them knocking on my door or blowing up my phone. It was about whether I'd open the door when they did. And for the first time in years, I was certain of my answer. I wouldn't. Not until they came as people who respected me, not as opportunists who saw me as their lifeline. The breaking point had come and gone. Now it was about holding the line, and I was ready. 3 weeks passed, and in that time, my house settled into a peace I hadn't felt in decades. The constant buzz of other people's emergencies had gone silent. No slamming doors, no blender roaring in the kitchen at odd hours, no perfume-clouded girlfriends drifting barefoot through my hallways. I filled the space with my own rhythms. Morning coffee on the back porch, long walks with Susan in the evenings, volunteering again at the literacy center, something I'd loved before I let my children's crises consume my calendar. For the first time in years, my life was on my terms. The credit card company had finished their investigation and ruled in my favor. $17,000 in unauthorized charges reversed. The account flagged for potential fraud. No criminal charges for Lily, but no restored access either. That door was closed. On a warm Tuesday afternoon, David's car rolled into my driveway. He looked thinner, more grounded, but there was a weight in his eyes. I met him at the porch. The wedding's officially off, he said. I nodded. I figured as much after you brought me that check. Are you all right? I am, he said. I've had time to think, Lily. She's not ready for the kind of partnership I want, and I'm not ready to marry someone who thinks taking from her mother is no big deal. He handed me an envelope, receipts, copies of emails. I found this when I was going through our paperwork. I think you should see it. Inside were screenshots of a credit application, Lily's name, my social security number. My stomach turned cold. She tried to open a store credit card in your name, David said quietly. The application got denied, but I thought you should know. I sat heavily on the porch step. I shouldn't have been shocked, but I was. The idea that she'd cross yet another line, even after everything, was both devastating and clarifying. Thank you for telling me, I said. That's the least I can do, David replied. For what it's worth, I think she's starting to burn bridges she can't rebuild. After he left, I called Claire. We talked about adding an identity theft alert to my accounts and credit reports, and she promised to document the incident in case things escalated. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and called Susan over. She listened without interrupting. her jaw tightening with each detail. She's doubling down, Susan said finally. Sometimes when people feel the consequences closing in, they get desperate. The next morning, desperation showed up at my door. Lily stood on the porch, her hair brushed this time, makeup carefully applied, but there was a twitchy energy under the polished surface. She didn't wait for an invitation before stepping inside. "I want to come home," she said, her voice clipped. "This isn't your home," I replied. She ignored me, moving into the living room. "Melissa's moving in with her boyfriend, and I can't afford rent on my own. I've been looking for places, but the deposits are insane." "You have a job," I said. "It's not enough," she shot back, "and you have a whole house with empty rooms." I leaned against the doorway, and I like it that way. Her eyes flashed. "So you're really going to let your own daughter struggle over money you don't even need?" "This isn't about need," I said evenly. "It's about boundaries. You cross them over and over, and you've shown me you can't be trusted with access to my home or my finances." She tried for the wounded look again. "I've said I'm sorry." "No, you've said you're inconvenienced by the consequences," I corrected. "That's different." Her voice sharpened. "You know what? Fine. You're just proving everyone right. You've changed. You're cold. No wonder Dad always had to smooth things over for you." I felt the hit of that one. She knew invoking Richard was a weapon, but I didn't let it land. "Goodbye, Lily," I said, opening the front door. She stood there a moment, glaring, then stormed out. 2 hours later, my phone started lighting up. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, an old family friend, even my sister-in-law, each leaving some version of the same message. "Lily says you've lost it. Are you okay?" They weren't calling to understand. They were calling to check the gossip. Instead of defending myself, I sent each of them a short, polite text. "Thank you for your concern. I'm fine and fully capable of managing my own affairs." That night, Ethan called. "Mom, this has to stop. You're making us look bad." "You're making yourselves look bad," I replied. "I'm just no longer covering for you." He sighed heavily. "Lily says you're refusing to help her find a place to live." "That's correct." "So what? She's just supposed to live on the street." "She's a 31-year-old with a master's degree and a job. She has options. She just doesn't like them." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "You know," he said finally, "there's a point where stubbornness becomes cruelty, and there's a point where enabling becomes self-destruction." I countered. We hung up without resolution. By Friday, the calls and messages had slowed. I suspected Lily was running out of sympathetic ears, or maybe the people she'd recruited were starting to see the pattern. That weekend, Susan and I went to the farmer's market. We bought fresh peaches, homemade bread, and a small bouquet of sunflowers for my kitchen table. It was the kind of morning I wouldn't have made time for before. Too busy playing crisis manager. As we loaded the groceries into my car, Susan said, "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you've already won. They just don't know it yet." I smiled. She might be right. Back at home, I arranged the flowers and boughs in a jar on the counter. The house smelled like bread and sunlight, and for the first time in months, I felt completely steady. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain: my line was drawn, and I wasn't stepping back over it. The Sunday after the farmer's market, I was in the garden, clipping dead blooms from the rose bushes, when I saw David's car turn into my driveway. For a second, I thought he might be returning the shears he'd borrowed weeks ago, but then I noticed the envelope in his hand. "Afternoon, Maggie," he said, stepping out of the car. His face was calm, but there was something deliberate in the way he walked toward me. "David," I greeted, wiping my hands on my gardening gloves. "What brings you by?" "I wanted to give you this." He handed me the envelope. Inside was another cashier's check, this time for $8,500. I frowned. "David, you already gave me a check. You don't owe me this." He shook his head. I do. This covers the other half of those wedding expenses. I benefited from them, too, whether I knew about it or not. I don't want to walk away with that debt hanging over me, even indirectly. His voice was steady, no defensiveness, no justification, just accountability. It struck me how different it felt from every conversation I'd had with Lily or Ethan in years. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this, I said, and not just the money, the gesture. David gave a small smile. For what it's worth, I'm sorry things turned out this way. I really did hope Lily and I could make it work. But I think she needs to figure out who she is without leaning on someone else's foundation. I nodded, understanding more than he probably realized. That's a hard lesson to learn. After he left, I set the check on my desk, next to the first one he'd brought weeks ago. They weren't just pieces of paper, they were proof that respect and responsibility still existed, just not where I'd been looking for them. The following evening, I was on the porch reading when a silver sedan I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. Lily stepped out of the passenger seat, followed by a young woman I didn't know. "This is Melissa," Lily said quickly as they reached the porch. "Mom, I need to talk to you." I glanced at Melissa. "Evening. Would you like to wait in the car?" Melissa's eyes flicked between us. "Yeah, I think I will." She retreated without a word. Lily turned back to me, her voice tight. "David's gone. The wedding's off. I'm staying on Melissa's couch, and I can't do it anymore. I need to come home." I held her gaze. "No." Her jaw dropped. "What do you mean? No, this is my home?" "It was," I said evenly. "You made it clear it wasn't when you excluded me from your engagement dinner, took money without asking, and called me a bitter old woman when I finally set boundaries." Her voice wavered. "I was upset. I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did," I said for the first time in years. "You said exactly what you think of me, and I heard you." Her eyes glistened. "I don't have anywhere else to go." "You have plenty of options," I replied. "You just don't like them." "Fine," she snapped. "What do you want out from me? An apology. I'm sorry I used your credit card. I'm sorry I didn't invite you. I'm sorry I said those things about you being alone. There, happy." I studied her for a moment. "You just told me what you did. I'm asking what you're sorry for." She blinked, clearly thrown. I don't understand the difference." "That's the point," I said softly. "You're sorry for the consequences, not for the choices. And until that changes, nothing else will." Dossier. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she turned on her heel and walked back to the car. Melissa started the engine, and they drove away without looking back. That night, Ethan called. "Lily told me what happened. Mom, this is ridiculous. She's your daughter." "She's an adult," I said, "and she's responsible for her life, just like you are for yours." "This isn't who you are," he said, his tone almost pleading. "No," I replied, "this isn't who I was. I'm not going back." There was a pause. "So, that's it. You're done with us." "I'm done being used by you," I said. "If you change, if you start treating me like a person instead of a resource, we'll see what happens. But the change has to be real." "And how do we prove it?" "You don't prove it to me, you prove it to yourselves." When the call ended, I realized I didn't feel drained. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. Over the next week, the silence held. No cars in the driveway, no calls, no texts. I started spending more mornings in the garden, more evenings on the porch with Susan, swapping recipes and stories. I rejoined my old book club. I even started a small side project, painting the guest room a warm sage green, just because it pleased me. One afternoon, Susan showed up with a flyer for a community center event. "They're starting a garden club," she said. "You should come with me." For the first time in a long while, I said yes to something that was just for me. The siege was over, though I knew there might be skirmishes ahead. Boundaries don't erase history, they just mark where you refuse to relive it. But I'd discovered something more important than victory over my children's demands. I'd discovered my own worth, outside of what I could provide. And as I stood in my newly painted guest room, sunlight pooling on the fresh green walls, I realized that this peace, this autonomy, was the real inheritance I was going to protect. In the end, I didn't win by cutting my children out of my life. I won by cutting out the version of myself that had allowed their needs to matter more than my own well-being. The Maggie who said yes out of fear, who confused enabling with love, who tolerated exclusion and disrespect just to keep the peace, she's gone. I can't say what the future holds for my relationships with Lily and Ethan. Maybe one day they'll learn the difference between loving someone and using them. Maybe they won't. But either way, I'll keep living in a house that's mine in every sense of the word, surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not for what I can give. If you've ever been afraid to draw a line with the people you love, I hope my story shows you that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors you choose when and how to open. And sometimes, keeping them closed is the kindest thing you can do for yourself. If you're still here with me, thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're watching or listening from. And remember, you are worth more than what you can provide, and it's never too late to start living like it.